Hi, it's Johanna and welcome to my channel. I wanted to follow up on the video I just did, the most recent video, where I showed you my perfume formula notebooks and my experiments. It wasn't until after I was editing the video that I did the math on 9 boxes of perfume experiments that each contain 75 spots for the bottles. So 75 bottles in each box times 9, I believe, is 675. Now I'm thinking it's 9 boxes. I don't think I counted the box that my son's experiments are in. His box is not full, but I'm pretty sure it's 9. So 9 times 75 is 675 experiments over the last 2.5 years. So I'm learning to make perfume mostly on my own. I do use a lot of resources in terms of like online, there are people online that have channels who like to teach. They like to teach about perfume making and they're good at it. One is Sarah McCartney. She has her own house. She makes perfume in the UK. And I think she might have a shop in London as well. She teaches and does classes online and in person. And she supplies materials if you're doing it in person. And then there's Sam Macer, who I mentioned, he created Formulaire, which is the software program that you can use on your iPad or whatever device, including computer, that you input your materials and the quantities and the dilutions, and it will say what percentage it is in the fragrance. And yeah, it's a great program. So I use that plus my formula notebooks. Other resources I use are, I'm a member of mainly one, but there are multiple fragrance making groups on Facebook. So I'm a member of those, and there are people who have their own perfume houses and are professionally trained and have been doing it for a long time. One of the members and administrators is Sarah McCartney. Another administrator and member that's been a member for a long time, probably since the beginning, his name is Paul Kyler, K-I-L-E-R. And he was the perfumer for one of the zoologist fragrances. Yeah, so Paul Kyler, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing his last name correctly. He has, in the Fragrantica database, 24 perfumes listed. And I'm sure he does a lot of them for his own house, which is PK Perfumes. He's got 16 in there for that house. Also, zoologist perfumes. He actually did 2 fragrances for zoologists. 2014, he did Panda, which I don't think I've smelled, but maybe I have, because I do. My zoologist discovery kit is from 2022, so it should have had Panda in it. And then the other one is from 2014 as well, Rhinoceros. So those 2 fragrances. He is very well respected in the fragrance community, and he has good ethics, and so does Sarah McCartney. They are opinionated and they share their opinions, and it's great to be in a perfume group where people are going to be honest. Like they're honest about their opinions about fragrance oils. I think it's called fragrance oils. It's where you can get those fragrance oils. They're already formulated. Sometimes they even are dupes of well-known fragrances, and you can use those in maybe like soap making or candle making. I'm not sure on that because I've never done those 2, but you're not supposed to use it in making perfume. There's various reasons that they go into on a regular basis with new people that come into the group wanting to make perfumes by just using fragrance oils and adding alcohol and maybe something else, but mainly just putting stuff together and selling it. And it's very much frowned upon doing that in perfume making. So at the very beginning, when I purchased my materials from Perfumer's Apprentice, I didn't know that, and I did purchase about 2 different fragrance oils. One was mango, because it was hard to find a mango material that wasn't a fragrance oil at that time. I think since there might be one. And then think the other one was a blueberry one. And those were for projects I was working on with my son, who's now 10, but at the time he was like 8.5 or something. And we work on things maybe a couple times a year together, ideas he has, and I help him with it. And then we decide when he's done. And usually he's pretty quick with it. You know, usually it takes about 2 or 3 days of work, and then he's ready to decide on making it, and we make a larger batch and put it in bottles and hand it out to his family members. So yes, 675 perfume experiments done by myself. I'm impressed as well because I don't usually stick to things this well. I'm not usually this consistent. I'm all over the place sometimes with my creative endeavors. Over the years, as people that have ADHD often find out about themselves, I have ADHD. I've known it since I was around 37 years old, and I've been treated for it. And it's been really eye-opening for me to learn about how it affects the way you think and how it makes you kind of like wonder, am I lazy or not? Because sometimes I can do things and really put my mind to it, and other times I can't. I don't know why. Those kinds of things. So over the years, I've collected a lot of special interests. Also, autism. Was diagnosed when I was around 42 with autism and high functioning, apparently. Although sometimes I don't feel high functioning, but yeah. So autism and ADHD, it's not easy in the world with those two things, but I decided that I was going to set aside my other creative endeavors, not feel guilty for not continuing to do those right now, and just put all my creative effort and energy into making fragrances. And so far that's been going well for me. So whenever I feel creative, I'll either make YouTube videos, do research for YouTube videos that I want to do in the future. I'm working on a few, usually a few at a time. Right now I'm working on a few YouTube videos and the research behind those. And then other creative outlet is making perfume. So 2 days ago, I started something, a perfume experiment called Vanilla Mild Amber. This one. And I only have 5 materials in it, and that was on purpose. I wanted to make an amber fragrance. Now this is inspired by Bourbon French perfumes and how their ambers seem to be more creamy, not sweet type phenolic, and low on the benzoin or resin. Low on that, and also low on the woody materials. And so I think that's a great base for making fragrances, especially the kind that I've been working on in the last 6 months, which is I've been focusing on fruity fragrances. And you need a base for fruity fragrances, something that'll help it last longer, something that'll help bind it to the skin or the material that you're applying it to so that it doesn't dissipate so quickly. Because fruity materials and fruity notes are usually in the top or the mid of the fragrance. So having vanilla there can help, even if you use it in a small amount. Using a high quality vanilla material is good for that. I have Vanilla Absolute here that I got from Eden Botanicals. This is pretty expensive, but you do dilute it. I'm using it at 10% dilution in alcohol. Also, I was lazy this time and I didn't want to make a new dilution because there's none in here left. And it's a process to make a dilution. You have to heat up the 100% potency material to make it liquid enough to pull it out of the bottle, and then you measure it, weigh it with alcohol for the right concentration. So I'm using this instead for this particular experiment. This is Vanilla Bean Key Accord from Perfumer's Apprentice. And you can look at the, it's called the SDS, which is a document that shows the materials they put into here and what percentages they used. And these key accords are made by perfumers, usually at companies like Givaudan or some of the other ones too, fragrance oil companies. and they are made to be easy for hobby perfumers to find something that works well, and they don't have to just make everything themselves. But this is not the goal for me. The goal would be to use Vanilla Absolute and maybe other things. So in this current fragrance here, with the 5 materials that include the vanilla bean key accord, I am also using coumarin and the vanilla bean key accord. I'm using benzoin at 10%, and I only used 1 drop of it. And I'm using ambrette seed CO2, which is a way of getting the ambrette seed, fragrance aspects out of the ambrette seed. And I'm using that at 0.1%, and I used, a larger amount of that than I usually do because it doesn't have a lot of a smell. And in a previous video, I mentioned the ambrette seed tends to smell nutty, very slightly nutty, not overly sweet though, and like musky, but not in an animalic kind of way. And then I'm also using carrot seed absolute CO2 at 1% in here, and I'm using a medium to low dose of that. Carrot seed absolute can give also a little nutty, also umami, mealy, meaty kind of aspect to the fragrance. And I think all of these materials I have in here are binding, fixative base materials. So I have this here and I'm smelling it. This is a 40%, meaning like there's 40% materials and the rest is alcohol, which is a very high percent. And I would put alcohol in here now that it's matured for a few days together in the high concentration. Letting these molecules kind of like form their own relationships with each other, and then add alcohol, make a bigger amount, and then start taking out like about 3 grams at a time for a new experiment off of this, kind of like a branch off of this. And probably using this with some of the fruity ideas I have for fragrances I want to work on. So that's what I'm working on right now. And I'm trying to be patient with myself because I've been working on a particular fragrance since September, and I was working on it a lot for 2 or 3 months, and then I took a break in December from it. But that fragrance idea is to do with a book that I read. It takes place in the 1500s in France, in the Loire Valley Forest. It's a historical fiction novel, and it's by an author named Georgia Taylor, who I think did 1 other book, and I don't know if she's still around or not. But this book I have is called Lamia A Witch, and it's a remarkable book. It's available on eBay and it's not that expensive. I don't think it's available on Kindle because it's such an old book. I think it was released in like maybe, I think it was first released in 1994. And so that book has inspired me to make a lot of the fragrances that I've made, and the fragrances I sent to Ramsey back in 2023 were inspired by atmospheres and situations in that book. So I like the idea of basing a lot of my fragrances on that book because it's so inspiring for me. I also like the idea of, conceptually basing fragrances in a work of art, such as a book, where people can actually go and read the book and experience your fragrances and just see what they think. It kind of adds a whole nother dimension. It's like a multimedia kind of thing. And so this fragrance I'm working on is something about strawberries in the woods. So I'm imagining the character Lamia, who is around the age of maybe 10 to 12 years old, and she's been raised by her mom in a cave in a forest in France. And that forest is located in the Loire Valley of France, which I think is in the southern portion of France. And it's during the times when they would like burn people they thought were witches. And her mom was burned at the stake in front of her when she was pretty young. And ever since then, she's been living in this cave by herself. And then the beginning of the book starts out where a couple of men are walking through the woods and they come upon her doing her thing, which is like catching fish and eating them raw. And she's very unkempt and like potentially not many clothes, like she's very straggly. She doesn't have a mom to take care of her, and she's not even a grown-up. So she's kind of like a very primitive kind of person. And plus she has this traumatic experience with her mom being burned at the stake by the villagers who are just outside the forest. So I'm imagining that what she eats is what she finds in the forest, or what she's able to steal from the village if she can. She can also trade things that she finds, like she finds man's shoes and she thinks she can trade that with the baker's son for some bread. And so the fragrances I sent to Ramsey, a lot of them, I think at least 2 of them were leather aspects to them, leather fragrances. So this fragrance is going to be like the atmosphere of her finding wild strawberries in the forest, eating them, but also with the backdrop of the Loire Valley Forest and what might be growing there in the forest, which isn't a lot. It's not a lot, and it's not a lot of florals that grew in the forest there because it's, you know, forest, so there's not a lot of sun for them. But that's what I'm working on, berries in the woods. It's not the final name for it, but that's just in my head. That's what I think of it as. So I'm working on the strawberry accord, and I want it to be a wild strawberry accord. So I've been researching what wild strawberries or musk strawberries would smell like. And then thinking about what the woodland backdrop would be, how I want that to smell. And I don't want that to overwhelm the strawberry aspect of it. I want the strawberries to be like really there. It's very challenging to make a good strawberry accord that doesn't smell candy-like or girly, which I don't mind if it smells girly, but I want this to be like a unisex fragrance. I want people to feel like they can wear it. So that's my idea that I'm working on, and I just wanted to share it with you. I'd like to maybe branch out a little as far as my perfume content on this channel, and also go into like some other things as far as content goes. I'm thinking, considering it, and I have a lot of ideas, and so thought maybe I would share with you some of my ideas I'm working on. I've decided to call this a hobby. It was hard for me to decide to do that instead of I'm a future perfumer with my business plans and everything. Because right now, if the fragrance industry the way it is, so much about marketing, and I'm just feeling like it has more to do with marketing than it does to do with quality so much. But also, I need to learn how to make perfume, and it takes a long time. Perfumers often go to school like IPSCA in France. I think it's in Paris. That's the biggest perfume school in the world, as far as I know. And they often go there. It's most likely very expensive and time consuming, and usually they would get a job at a major fragrance company after that. So I'm past the age where that would make sense for me to do. Also, I have a family here in Portland, Oregon. So instead of that, I'm thinking about how can I learn how to make fragrances myself and not pressure myself to make money off of it, because the packaging and the marketing costs so much more than the actual fragrance does, that, you know, it can take the fun out of things. It can take the creative part out of it. It can take just the steam out. I've been looking for bottles and ways to do labels on a perfume bottle that won't, you know, wash away because of the alcohol that could run down the bottle. So you have to have a special way of making labels. It's expensive, and it's just kind of hard to get it all to go together. And people expect things to look professional if they're going to buy it. And so I'm just lowering my expectations for releasing fragrances, and I'm just focusing on the hobby aspect of it and the learning and the journey. And also then I can focus also on sharing with people that are interested in hearing about how it is, because it's a big investment of time, energy, and space when you start buying perfume making materials. It's, you know, hard to decide what to buy and what to, you know, because it takes up a lot of space. You know, you don't just have the space that you need to store the 100% pure materials, but then you make dilutions, and sometimes each material has more than one dilution that you want to make. It takes up a lot of space, as you saw in that video. So I'm trying to just be realistic and work it out. That's what I'm doing. All right, well, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.